Hello, my friend. We all have people in our lives who drain us, confuse us, or make us feel small. But for some reason, we keep letting them stay. Maybe it's out of guilt. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's because we've been conditioned to believe that keeping people around, no matter the cost, is a sign of strength or loyalty. But it's not. Tolerating disrespect isn't noble. Staying silent to keep the peace isn't peace. It's self-betrayal. And the longer you keep giving access to people who weaponize your kindness, the more you lose touch with your own power. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about playing games. This is about reclaiming your energy, your clarity, your self-worth. Because the truth is, not everyone deserves a seat at your table just because they've known you for a long time. Some people are here to teach you how to stand up for yourself. Some are here to show you what you will no longer tolerate. And some are here simply to remind you that your peace is worth protecting, even if it makes other people uncomfortable. These words are for anyone who has felt stuck, exhausted, or emotionally hijacked by the same people over and over again. If you've been bending until you break, shrinking to keep someone else comfortable, or silencing your needs just to keep the connection alive, this is your wake-up call. You don't have to keep living like that. You don't have to keep explaining, defending, or fixing what was never yours to carry in the first place. You don't owe toxic people your peace. Let that sink in for a second. Because if you're like most people, you've been conditioned to believe that keeping the peace means keeping quiet, staying agreeable, not rocking the boat. But that's not peace. That's suppression. That's walking on eggshells every single day, monitoring your tone, double-checking your words, replaying conversations in your head just to make sure you didn't provoke someone who was already set to explode. That's not peace. That's survival. There's this internalized guilt a lot of us carry around, especially if the toxic person is family or someone you've known forever. You think, but they've been through a lot, or they don't have anyone else, or that's just how they are. And while compassion is a beautiful thing, it's not a permission slip for someone to damage you repeatedly. You can understand someone's trauma without allowing them to create more of it in your life. You can empathize with someone's pain without making yourself the casualty of it. What happens when you keep giving your peace away to toxic people is that you start to lose sight of who you are. You're constantly on the defensive, trying to anticipate the next jab, the next guilt trip, the next manipulation. And here's the truth. When you're stuck in that cycle, your nervous system never gets to rest. You stay in fight or flight mode. Your mind races, your heart tightens, and you wonder why you feel exhausted all the time. It's because being around toxicity isn't just mentally draining, it's physically damaging. Your body keeps the score even when your mind tries to justify staying. You might be thinking, but if I speak up, I'll make things worse. Here's the thing. When someone is toxic, the moment you stop catering to their comfort, they will make you the villain. They will call you selfish, cold, ungrateful. That's the playbook. That's how they keep you tangled. But that reaction isn't a sign you're wrong. It's confirmation that they were only ever interested in control. Not connection, not growth, control. And the moment you reclaim your peace, you disrupt that control. You've been trained to equate silence with strength, but sometimes silence is surrender. Sometimes speaking up or walking away is the most powerful declaration of self-worth you can make. You are allowed to remove yourself from conversations that drain you. You are allowed to stop explaining your boundaries. You are allowed to say, "This doesn't work for me," and leave it at that. You don't need a 5-paragraph essay. You don't need approval. You don't need to prove that someone is toxic for your experience to be valid. If it's hurting your spirit, if it's shrinking your confidence, if it's making you question your value, that's enough. Toxic people thrive on access. They need proximity to continue the cycle, to poke, to prod, to provoke. But when you cut off access, when you stop responding to the bait, when you choose not to show up to every emotional argument you're invited to, you take your power back. You stop bleeding energy into a relationship that was never reciprocal. You start redirecting that energy toward yourself, toward healing, clarity, joy. Here's a hard truth. Not everyone gets a front row seat to your life just because they've been in it for a long time. Longevity doesn't equal loyalty. Blood doesn't equal bond. Proximity doesn't guarantee peace. You have every right to reevaluate the roles people play in your story. especially when their presence begins to rewrite your sense of self. You're not being harsh, you're being honest. And honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, is the birthplace of real peace. Sometimes peace looks like fewer texts. Sometimes it looks like not answering the phone. Sometimes it's declining the invite, muting the conversation, stepping out of the narrative entirely. And it's not because you hate them. It's because you finally love yourself enough to stop giving your light to someone who only ever showed up with shadows. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. That's courage. If someone constantly undermines your confidence, questions your worth, or treats your kindness like a weakness, it's not your job to keep giving them access just to appear nice or forgiving. Peace is not passive. It's active. It's a choice you make over and over again. And choosing it means being willing to disappoint others before you continue to betray yourself. The world may not always reward you for it. People may not always understand it. But peace isn't about their comfort. It's about your freedom. Distance is clarity, not cruelty. The moment you start to pull away from people who drain your energy, confuse your thinking, and manipulate your emotions, everything starts to come into focus. That fog you've been living in, the second guessing, the anxiety, the overanalyzing, that starts to lift. And when it does, you realize that what you were calling a normal was actually just your nervous system adapting to dysfunction. You were trying to survive chaos and calling it love. You were tolerating disrespect and calling it patience. But once you step back, even just a little, you begin to see what you couldn't from inside the storm. People who thrive on control or drama don't want you to take space because space equals perspective. And once you gain perspective, you stop playing the game. That's when their tactics stop working. That's when you stop being so easy to guilt trip, manipulate, or silence. That's when the mask comes off. And often that's when they'll push even harder to pull you back in. They'll call you distant. They'll say you've changed. They'll paint you as cold or heartless. Oh. But what they're really saying is, you're not bending to my will anymore, and that's threatening to them. Creating distance doesn't mean you hate someone. It doesn't mean you're unforgiving. It means you're choosing your well-being over their chaos. It means you've finally stopped convincing yourself that your boundaries are too much, or that your expectations are too high. It means you've stopped shrinking to make room for someone who refuses to grow. And yes, that might look like pulling away from conversations, declining invitations, limiting contact, or even going no contact altogether. But it's not about punishment. It's about protection. Your peace is not a prize they get to win back by behaving better for a few days. It's not a reward for short-term change. It's a lifestyle you build when you decide to stop settling for the bare minimum. People often equate closeness with love. But just because someone is physically close to you doesn't mean they're emotionally safe. And just because someone shares your blood, your past, or your history doesn't mean they deserve unlimited access to your energy. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is create a little breathing room. Room to think clearly. Room to feel your feelings without being gaslit. Room to hear your own voice without the constant noise of someone else's opinions, projections, or moods. And in that space, you start to reconnect with yourself, the version of you that existed before the emotional manipulation, before the guilt, before the exhaustion. Taking space also reveals who people really are. Healthy people respect boundaries. They might not like it, but they won't punish you for it. Toxic people, on the other hand, interpret your distance as a challenge. They'll try to manipulate the narrative. They'll weaponize your silence. They'll accuse you of being dramatic, ungrateful, selfish. But that says more about them than it does about you. Because someone who truly cares about your well-being will ask why you need space, not punish you for taking it. They'll want to understand, not dominate. They'll come to the table with humility, not accusations. Sometimes the only way to see the truth is from a distance. When you're too close, you can't tell the difference between love and obligation, between care and control, between loyalty and fear. But when you step back, even temporarily, you begin to see what aligns with your values and what violates them. You see who's cheering for your growth and who's intimidated by it. You see who supports your boundaries and who only respects you when you have none. And that clarity is powerful. It's not always pretty. It doesn't always feel good, but it's real. And real is what you need when you're trying to rebuild your self-worth after years of emotional erosion. You don't have to announce your distance. You don't need a dramatic exit or a social media declaration. Quiet space speaks louder than arguments, and it gives you the time and mental clarity to ask yourself hard questions. Am I respected here? Am I safe here? Can I be fully myself in this relationship without walking on eggshells? If the answer is no, you already know what you need to do. The distance you create isn't about making them uncomfortable. It's about finally choosing not to make yourself uncomfortable just to keep them happy. It's not about being mean. It's about being honest. And that honesty might make others uncomfortable, especially if they benefited from your silence, your availability, your constant forgiveness. But their comfort is not your responsibility. Your clarity is. Stop negotiating with emotional terrorists. The moment you find yourself constantly defending your choices, explaining your boundaries, justifying your feelings, or apologizing for things you didn't do, you're not in a relationship. You're in a psychological war zone. And the worst part is, it doesn't start that way. It starts with charm, with attention, with just enough kindness to hook you in. But over time, the ground starts to shift. You notice the subtle digs, the passive-aggressive comments, the way your confidence begins to chip away. And by the time you realize you're not safe emotionally, you've already been trained to question yourself every time you try to speak up. Emotional terrorists don't show up wearing warning labels. They show up with smiles, with promises, with just enough vulnerability to get you to drop your guard. And then slowly they start using your empathy against you. They know exactly how to twist your words, how to make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, how to turn your concerns into attacks. If you bring up something that hurt you, they'll make you feel like you're overreacting. If you try to walk away, they'll suddenly become the victim. It's a cycle designed to keep you stuck, confused, exhausted, emotionally dependent. The danger in negotiating with people like this is that they don't argue to understand. They argue to dominate. You could lay out your feelings as calmly and clearly as possible, and they'll still find a way to flip the script. They'll accuse you of being too sensitive. They'll say you're always starting drama. They'll bring up your past, your mistakes, your flaws, anything to distract from their behavior. And you end up going in circles, defending yourself against accusations that aren't even based in reality. It's not a conversation. It's psychological warfare. And you're not going to win by playing fair with someone who's never had any intention of being fair. It's easy to get caught in the trap of wanting to be understood. You think, if I can just explain it better, maybe they'll get it. They do get it. They just don't care. Or worse, they do care, and they enjoy the control they have over your emotional state. Every time you show up to explain yourself again, they see it as weakness. Every time you defend your boundary like it's a crime, they see it as permission to keep crossing it. You're not being heard, you're being studied. And they're learning exactly what buttons to push to keep you in line. You can't negotiate with someone who sees your boundaries as a challenge. You can't reason with someone who benefits from your confusion. You can't win with someone who sees your pain as leverage. The only way to break the cycle is to stop showing up to the negotiation table. You have to realize that peace with them will always cost your peace with yourself. And once you reach that point, the only question left is, are you willing to disappoint them in order to stop betraying yourself? Every time you lower your standards to avoid a fight, you reinforce the idea that their comfort is more important than your dignity. Every time you tolerate their outbursts, their silent treatment, their guilt trips, you teach them that love means control. And then one day, you look in the mirror and don't even recognize yourself anymore. You're anxious, reactive, small. You used to be confident. You used to trust your gut. You used to feel strong. Now you're stuck in a cycle of apologizing for having needs, for having emotions, for having a voice. Walking away doesn't make you weak. It makes you awake. Awake to the pattern. Awake to the manipulation. Awake to the truth that you deserve more than emotional blackmail disguised as love. You deserve real connection. Safe connection. A space where your no is respected, not punished. Where your feelings are validated, not used against you. Where you don't have to shrink, over-explain, or compromise your peace just to keep the other person calm. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining yourself. Stop trying to prove that you're worthy of respect. Stop hoping that this time will be different. Emotional terrorists don't change because you love them harder. They change if they ever do, because they lose access to people who let them get away with it. You don't heal by staying in the fire. You heal by walking out of it and refusing to go back. At the end of the day, protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's essential. You weren't put on this earth to be someone else's emotional punching bag, fixer, or fallback plan. You're not here to carry people who refuse to carry themselves. You don't have to keep proving your worth to people who only value what they can take from you. You don't have to keep choosing loyalty to others over loyalty to yourself. What you allow is what will continue. And the moment you decide to stop participating in your own burnout, the moment you stop giving oxygen to toxic cycles, the game changes. You'll lose some people. You'll confuse others. You might even feel lonely for a while. But then something shifts. You start to feel free. You start to feel like you again, clearer, lighter, stronger. And once you've felt that peace, the real kind, you'll never trade it again just to make someone else more comfortable. You don't need their validation. You need your boundaries. You don't need to keep explaining yourself. You need to trust yourself. You don't need their chaos. You need your clarity. And you've always had the right to walk away from anything that made you forget your own power. This is not about being cold. This is about being clear. Let them call you distant. Let them say you've changed. You're not bitter. You're just finally done bleeding for people who never knew how to stop cutting.